Okay, Mom, last time we ended with Valerie, and now we're talking about Tony.
Anthony.
Yes, Anthony. What do you remember about his
thought
pregnancy and his birth?
Anthony Blake would be a good name for him, and then his initials would be ABC, Anthony Blake Crockett. So that's what we named him. And he was born up here at Lakeview, and I remember Dr. Brown said, "You have such a hard time. If you get pregnant again, I think we'll take it cesarean." But I didn't get pregnant again. I was only 40 years old. I remember when he was a little kid and I was out someplace and a lady said, "Is that your first one?" And I said, "No, not my first one. It's my last one."
I wasn't here for that. Where was I?
You were on your mission.
What do you remember about my mission call?
I remember you went to New Zealand and we had Thanksgiving early, so you could be here for Thanksgiving. We took you to the airport and some girl brought you a cake. Do you remember that?
No.
You do, and you held it on your lap, or you were going to hold it on your lap when you got on the airplane.
I don't remember that.
Well, that's the truth. And then we got home and Cleo DeVoe called me up and I was crying and she said, "What are you crying for?" And I said, "Well, we just dropped Gary off on his mission." She wasn't a member of the church. I said, "But we wanted him to go and we're glad he went, but it's just hard to send one of your kids that many miles away." And so then I had Tony just a few weeks. Do you remember what day you left?
I think November 7th.
I know it was
right.
before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Then the 1st of December, I started having labor pains, and where was DeRay? I don't remember calling him, but he took me to the hospital, I guess. Can't remember.
Which hospital was Tony born at?
Bountiful, Lakeview.
Wasn't Lakeview. Lakeview wasn't there then.
What was the name of the hospital?
South Davis Community Hospital.
Anyway,
It's where the rest home is now, or the rehab center on the corner of 5th South and Orchard.
Dr. Brown was my doctor again. But anyway, he was another nice little boy, and so I brought him home. And I remember once I was getting ready to go to Relief Society, and I laid him on the cupboard down in the little bathroom, and he rolled off. And I thought, oh my heavens. So I got him, he was bawling, of course, but he didn't, wasn't bleeding or anything, but I called the doctor and took him up to the doctor, and they checked him over and said, "No, he's fine. But if he's crying, just lay him in the middle of the bed and let him cry." I was laying him on the cupboard so he could watch me comb my hair and get ready for Relief Society or something. So I learned my lesson that time. And he started walking pretty early, not as early as Gary D did though. And
Okay, what do you remember about your kids growing up? Start with me because that was the first 10 years. What about going to school and all that stuff?
well, you went over here to Bountiful Element. First you started in Ogden, and we moved right in the middle of the year in January, and you come down here and you'd write, "Dear Mrs. Swan." You liked your first teacher up in
No,
Iowa.
that was moving from Preston to Ogden. Yeah, okay.
But then when we moved to Bountiful, you went over here to Bountiful Elementary, and that's where Valerie went too. You did pretty good in school. All of my kids did well in school. Pretty smart kids I had.
Any problems with any of us in school?
Nope. I remember Valerie used to get in her pajamas and go walking down the street. She wanted to go to school.
Anybody play sports?
Oh, you wanted to play in the band, and you did. Got a picture of that on that one video. You blowing a trumpet. Then you went to drums. Valerie took dancing lessons. I took her down. Now, who was it that taught her dancing? Somebody fairly famous, but I can't remember her name. But she'd come rolling out on the stage. I don't think she liked it very well, but she took them for took dancing lessons for a couple of years. She didn't really get very proficient in it, or, develop into a great ballerina or anything. And Tony went to Cub Scouts, but then he met that girl, and she quit going with him. He had a hard time. He used to cry, and Lila would say, I can hear him crying clear over to her house.
No kidding.
So when Kimmy broke up with her boyfriend, Tony called me one time, and I asked him if he remembered that. He said, yes, I do.
What do you remember about me going to BYU?
I remember going down there, and you had a sink full of dishes, and so I washed them for you. But Tony's the only one that graduated from college. He went to Weber State.
Yeah.
He was smart in a lot of ways, and he did really well up there, and he was the first one that graduated. I remember we went up to his graduation. He'd come in his cap and gown, but he went through a stage of wearing long hair and kind of rebelling, but he loved the Dallas Cowboys. And if they didn't win the game, he'd get so excited and hammer the doors. And so I went up today after church, walked up to Hazel's. I said, I'm coming up to console you about the BYU losing, because she is so into the BYU. And they wwere 20-0, over Utah.
I know.
But they lost for the 8th time straight. But Tony did like the Dallas Cowboys.
Where did Valerie go to school?
Bountiful Elementary. Then she went up to Logan to go to college for 1 year, I think, so she went.
When did she meet Dave?
Over on the tennis courts, playing tennis. And they played tennis. And he went up there and stayed. I can't remember who she roomed with. It must have been Diane Martineau and somebody, I don't know. Some of her friends were up there. And Dave went up there one time to visit her.
What about, let's see.
Tony did some practice teaching down here at what's the school north? Anyway, he said, those kids don't want to learn. They don't pay enough attention. I thought, now you're the teacher, now you know how it goes.
What do you remember about any of your kids dating?
I remember one girl would call you and you'd run out the front door and say, I'm not home. And Tony and that Allison would slough school. And then they'd come here and want something to eat. And I said, the school called and you weren't at school, so I'm not fixing you anything to eat. I was mad at him. He got a little hard to raise there for a while.
Do you remember meeting Leslie?
Yes. I remember telling Ann Stringfellow, Gary's bringing his girlfriend and her parents to dinner today. I was over at church, and I said, I'm just a nervous wreck. And she said, you don't have to think anything to be nervous about. You're just as good to meet as anybody. She'll be glad to meet you. So
Her son is now our bishop in Farmington.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah.
I don't remember him, but I remember Jane, because she used to pal around with Valerie and Laurie and Marilyn and Janice. And
So you met Lyle and Betty.
yeah.
You'd already met Leslie.
I don't remember the first time I met her. I remember when she come here with her dad and mother, because I was so nervous about them coming. What did I cook, Leslie? I think I had
Something delicious.
Huh?
I'm sure it was something delicious.
I can't remember what it was I fixed.
I don't remember either. But then you have a lot better memory than I do.
And Tony got kind of hard to handle for a couple, 3 years, but